So I would be in the clear. I mean, it would be tough. I would have to fight for it, but I could still get the job if I put up a fight. Whether or not I should have to fight for it is a separate issue, but these were the days, right? So despite the fact that I was in one of the most fragile periods of my life, I was ready to take on that struggle. So I investigated the legal issues further. And it so happens that this company, the reason they were hiring was because they were on the verge of being bought by a larger, richer company. And as a result of that acquisition, the offices would be moving a couple cities farther south on the San Francisco peninsula. And it was perfect for me because I figured I wouldn't have to run into the same people that I'd been running into at work. I'd be able to kind of start over in a new location. I would have a new desk. I would have a new dress code. I would have a new identification card, and I wouldn't have to explain everything about it. I thought it was ideal, you know, no awkward looks from the guy at the coffee cart that, you know, the first day I showed up, you know, and appearing differently, presenting differently. I figured there would be no pronoun problems with the new coworkers, which is a big deal. I wouldn't get stopped by the security guard for having the wrong ID. All of those really practical concerns were the things that I was thinking of. And, you know, I was also hoping that I might even be able to avoid that dreaded bathroom question that my boss had raised, right? Now, by this time I'd been turned over to the HR department at the new company. And the HR rep I spoke to was very young and awkward and in way over her head with this case that it really was. It was the case that nobody else wanted, so they gave it to this poor girl. And, you know, I tried valiantly to convince her that there wouldn't be any problems, that, you know, we could work all this out. But that, you know, kind of took my firm stance, you know, regardless, I made it clear I was protected by this statute that prohibited discrimination based on gender identity. And that's when I found out that because the company had moved 5 miles away, it was no longer within the city of San Francisco, city limits. And then because of that, they were no longer bound by the statute, and they could legally rescind the job offer, and, you know, they didn't have to hire me. I wasn't hired anyway. They had absolutely no obligation to me whatsoever. It was indeed an open and shut case, but I didn't get the job. Now, I think this story certainly shows how crucial it is to have non-discrimination legislation and codes and, you know, standards that include gender identity as well as sexual orientation. And as you all well probably know, that this fight is still going on in many cities across the country. I hope that discussion will happen at a national level, and I have my fingers crossed that the T at the end of LGBT won't be the first bargaining chip to be thrown on the table, as it sometimes is. I also think that this story, I tell you, that it shows a small part of the reason why I was so reluctant to revisit a past that was really painful to me. I mean, I was fortunate growing up. I was raised by loving, really flexible parents who did their best to support us kids. My younger brother, who you haven't seen yet in the film, but he had come out at 18 years old in the mid-1980s in Montana, and my parents had handled that really well. There was you know, our family unit had a lot of support. So when this job discrimination happened to me, it was, I think at the time, really the first time in my life that I felt dehumanized. Now, many people have had it much harder than me. And I don't want it to sound like I'm feeling sorry for myself, but I think it's important to talk about the dehumanization. And actually now I'm kind of glad that I experienced it then in this strange way. I think it's really easy to think that humankind is comprised of two categories, male and female. And this runs so deeply through our culture that it's hard to recognize how prevalent that assumption is. You know, it's very easy to presume that to be human is to be either male or female, and that anyone who doesn't fit neatly into either category is somehow not human. You know, put it another way, dehumanized. This leads me to the two big issues I hear my trans friends bring up again and again and again. When I was working on the speech, I polled a few friends, and they said that they always get these questions. They occur, you know, they recur often. And I think that many in here may have thought about these issues. So I bring up this transgender shop talk, or whatever we want to call it, because I imagine you sharing these issues more widely with other people. But before we get started, I thought it'd be fun to have a little group interaction. So I would like for each of you to turn to the person next to you. It's better if you're sitting next to a stranger, but it's fine if you're sitting next to somebody that you know. And I'd like you to discuss two things. First, tell them about your bathroom habits. Where you go, when, how often, that sort of thing. You know, just discuss the bathroom with them. And then the second thing I'd like you to talk about are your genitals. What they look like, how they feel, how you use them, that sort of thing. Okay, go. Pretty awkward, isn't it? But I figure it's always good to start out the day with a really awkward moment. You see from the film, there's all these awkward moments. Lady Gaga and awkward moments, good way to start off. But you know what? These are two big questions that trans people are forced to discuss all the time, often by complete strangers, usually, I would say. Now, by making an autobiographical film, I've opened the doors to these questions, and I'm happy to discuss them. But I bring these up just to let you know what I think a lot of trans people deal with, and you know, things that can make for a really awkward workplace, basically. Sorry, I'm dropping things over here. Now, if you ask me, I think these issues should probably be kept out of the workplace as much as possible, but that's not always possible. So let's talk about these issues a little bit. Big issue number one, the bathroom, right? Now, in my earlier story, you heard me say that the very first issue that my potential boss raised was, you know, this big bathroom question. You know, what are we going to do about that? Where would I go? Where would the others go? What would they think? The underlying assumption being that if I made other people uncomfortable, then obviously I couldn't be hired. So let's think about this question. What would others think? What would other people think? That question, to me, is almost as bad as something else I heard. I don't have a problem with it, but others will. Others will. Others might. I mean, I don't think I even need to point out how these two excuses perpetuated other forms of discrimination for a really, really long time.